Alrighty, welcome everyone to the fourth session of Future M.D.s International Summer Camp. We are so excited to have everyone. Today we are joined by the amazing Dr. Ogo, who's going to be presenting about his journey into medical school. He's an incoming UPenn medical student, so we're really excited to hear his journey and what led him to attend the school and his journey to medical school. So we are so excited to have you, and I'll hand over the mic to you and you can get started whenever you feel comfortable.
Thank you, Ahmad. Hey everyone. I am super happy to be here. It's a gloomy morning in New York City right now. So good morning to everybody. Just, I guess, for me to get the sense of like where everybody is at. If you guys don't mind, just like, putting in the chat where you guys are right now. I imagine that, there's people all across the world. Okay, so I see Austin, Texas, Philippines, India, Egypt, Lebanon. Awesome. It is South Africa. Nice. It's nice to see you all. It is super nice to see you all. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Okay, so I will try to share my screen here. Okay, yeah, let me, we can share. Okay. You guys let me know if you can see my PowerPoints. Can I get like a thumbs up if you can see the PowerPoints? Okay, and okay, so now can you see my PowerPoint with my presenter notes, or do you just see the PowerPoints?
We see the presenter notes along with
the presenter notes. Okay, so I might have to, let me see, I might have to share my whole screen. Maybe that's what it is. Okay. Let me know, what do you still see?
It's the presenter view, but it's totally okay to have it in this format if it's the only format that's working.
Right. I'd prefer to show it this way, actually. I think I hopefully know what I'm presenting about. But yeah, so today I wanted to speak to you guys about letting your narrative shine true. Kind of as mentioned, I'm an incoming medical student at UPenn, and I found that during the application cycle, thinking about why I wanted to be a doctor, and thinking about why I wanted to be a doctor and making sure that translated, into my application were two different things. So I'm trying to help you guys, if you're in that thought process right now, if you're a little far away, just giving you some tips and tricks as far as like how you could get there. So I will get started. So a little bit about me. I was born in Lagos, Nigeria. I was born and raised in Lagos, Nigeria. So I lived in Lagos for 17 years of my life, and then I came to the US for college. So I went to the University of South Florida. And then I went to Columbia to get the master's in public health. And now I'm going to UPenn for medical school. And typically when I'm not studying, I'm either playing video games, I'm either watching or playing soccer. I actually spend probably the most time like outside of school or work, watching or playing soccer. And I also love, watching anime, reading manga. If anybody has some really good recommendations, that's not like the really mainstream stuff, you could put it in the chat for me, maybe at the end. Okay, and to speak a little bit about like my journey to medicine and kind of how I got here. So I had 4 years of undergrad. I got the bachelor's in biomedical sciences with a minor in humanities. And after I graduated, I stayed at the University of South Florida to work at the Center for Advanced Medical Learning and Simulation. So what I did there, I basically worked in medical education. So with mostly with the medical students, but I also worked with PA students and nursing students. And I kind of was in the experiential learning and simulations team. So in medical school and nursing school, PA school, you're going to do a lot of simulations. There's going to be a lot of like simulation-based work. And I was kind of part of that team that was crafting that experience and helping them through, some of like the standardized exams that they needed to take that had to do with either simulations or like standardized patients. So I really enjoyed that, and I did that for a year. And then I went on to a 2-year master's degree at Columbia, and I got an MPH in epidemiology with a certificate in global health. So while the pandemic was happening, I was getting my MPH in epidemiology. And at the time, I kind of was like a little so-so on like, do I really want to be a doctor? And I lived, if anybody like, has an idea of like how New York geography is, I lived in Washington Heights. And because I lived on the Columbia Medical Campus, I lived right next to New York Presbyterian. And every night, especially when the pandemic just started, every night I would hear sirens like blaring, because they're taking people to the hospital. And I think in that moment, I felt like I really wanted to respond. And that was one of the things that reaffirmed to me that I wanted to be a doctor. The certificate in global health, like I said, I was born in Lagos, Nigeria. Lagos, Nigeria is home for me. And, a lot of the issues that plague Nigeria, but also plague like in sub-Saharan Africa, in the Middle East, across like the Central Americas, are global health issues. So I want to be a physician, but I also want to be a global health / like public health physician. So after I did my master's degree, these last 2 years I've been working in clinical research in inflammatory bowel disease at Lenox Hill Hospital. Before that, I hadn't had any research experience that was clinical. So this was something good because it let me dabble in research, but it also allowed me to see like what it really is like to work as a doctor, because I worked in a team of doctors. My boss was the chief of the division of GI at Lenox Hill Hospital. And he was an incredible mentor, really, really great physician, somebody that I really look up to. So I was able to see the clinical research side of things, in a big practice, but also see like the clinical, the admin, all of that stuff. And I guess one caveat I would like to point out, because this kind of just looks like there were 3 steps, to get to, but there were so many steps in between. And then there were so many people that helped me in between, whether it's friends, whether it's mentors, like my boss at Lenox Hill Hospital, teachers, supervisors, there's always so many people that, help in this journey into medicine. And I'll speak a little bit about like building your network and mentorship a little later. Okay, so now I've talked about my journey into medicine. And I know that you guys want to, hopefully get some idea of like, how to get there. So at this point, I'd like to, again, kind of get a sense of like everybody in the room. So again, if you could put in the chats, like, where are you right now? Are you in high school? Are you a freshman? Are you a senior? Are you, doing a post-bac? I just want to get the sense of like where everybody is. Okay, high school. Gap year. Okay. Sounds good. So I'm getting a sense that we have a mixed bag. We have people, who are already okay. But it looks like the vast majority of people are, in high school, which is fine. The points that I'm trying to, hopefully, actually the points that I make will stick, and like, it will help you think about some of the kind of things that you should be doing when you want to get into medical school. So there's a few, like requirements, depending on the school. It might be a soft requirement, depending on the school, it might be a hard requirement. So one of the things that, that they expect that you do coming into medical school is that, you've shadowed. And essentially what shadowing means is, you followed around a physician. I mean, it's okay to shadow, people in other health professions because you get the sense of, what everybody does. I remember I shadowed, I was in a hospital in Nigeria, my first year after college. And I shadowed throughout the hospital. I shadowed physicians, I shadowed in the lab, I shadowed pharmacists, I shadowed in the neonatal world with nurses. But I think when you want to get into medicine, and if you want to be a physician, medical schools are looking to see that you have shadowed a doctor. They also want to see that you have some like level of healthcare work experience. And so I will talk about the requirements. And one of the things I also want to talk about is what they translate to, so that you can also understand like, why they're asking you to do some of these things. So, they want you to shadow and they want you to have healthcare work experience because they want you to have clarity. They want you to have confidence, and they also want you to be committed to this role. Because I don't think any of us are kind of under any illusions. Like medicine can be a difficult thing, like we are tasked with this very, very big responsibility of taking care of people, sometimes at their like most vulnerable stages. So, like they want people who have clarity that this is what this work looks like. It's not Grey's Anatomy. It's not anything that you see on TV. They want you to be confident in that decision, and they want, you to show commitments that this is actually something you want to do. Another requirement, depending on where you're going, it might be soft, it might be hard, is volunteering. So that could be clinical volunteering, working in the emergency departments, of a hospital, directing visitors, directing sometimes patients, handing out blankets. Like that's what I did when I worked, when I volunteered at the emergency department of Tampa General when I was in college. And then also volunteering in like non-clinical settings, whether that's like at the soup kitchen, whether it's, roadside cleanup, whether it's, tutoring kids, on the weekends. It's they want to see, that level of volunteerism, because you're going into a field that requires compassion, requires empathy. It's also a service-oriented job. It's a people facing job. So, they want to see that level of compassion and empathy, and volunteering is a very, very good way to show that. They want to see good grades. They want to see good MCAT scores. I think the reality of medical school is that it's getting more competitive. And people are doing better on the MCATs, which I think is to say that you guys, everyone in here, can do very well on the MCATs. It just takes some planning and some dedication. But they want to see, they want to see good grades and good test scores. I think there's some research out that actually shows that like just because you score like the highest on the MCAT, that doesn't necessarily like translate into whether you're going to do the best on your boards. It definitely doesn't translate into if you're going to be the best doctor. I think the reality is that the MCAT is here. It's likely going to stay. So one of the things that you probably just have to do, you probably just have to, score decently at it. Don't beat yourself up unnecessarily. I know that I did, during my cycle. But you focus on your grades throughout college. You put in the time for the MCATs, and I think everything should, work itself out. And one of the reasons why, they want, and I'll talk about research as well before I even go into that. So they also want to see research, mostly clinical research. There's different ways people see this. As far as like, if you find yourself on a pre-med Reddits, please log out. But if you find yourself on there, like regardless, you're going to see people talking about like, you have to do this amount of research, you have to get this amount of papers. I'm, going into one of the most heavy, research research heavy medical schools in the country, if not the world, and I don't have any publications. I do have a solid, clinical research background. But, the kind of research that I did didn't necessarily lend itself to getting a lot of publications. But essentially, I got all of the skills that I needed to get that. And again, so with grades and research, what they translate to is problem solving skills and also knowledge acquisition. So I think when you're thinking about why do they want research, it's because everything in medicine changes because we're constantly looking for better ways to do things. So they want to see that there's people that you've already showed this commitment to kind of like lifelong learning. And it's also like a skill that you have to develop. Like, I'm not saying that everybody's medical, career is going to be like super research heavy, but you can't afford to like be behind the times, essentially, because medicine changes this quickly. And leadership, I think leadership might be a little self-explanatory, but like as a doctor, you're going to be a leader on a healthcare team. So seeking out opportunities, in college and high school to, to develop those leadership competencies is always very, very good. And you can find leadership opportunities in so many different ways. Okay, so now you have, all of these requirements, down. You've done research, you have a few leadership positions, you have good grades, you have good MCATs. How do you bring all of this stuff together, to actually tell your own narrative? And I think one of the first things that you should, really think about is, are you trying to stand out versus are you trying to tell your own unique story? One of the things that you will find, again, if you lurk on whether it's Student Doctor Network or, it's the pre-med Reddits, you're going to see a lot of people comparing themselves. You're going to see, kind of these like endless like threads on like how like if you're not an Olympic gold medalist, you're not going to get into medical school. And, like what I found is I'm not an Olympic gold medalist. I don't have any Nobel Prizes, but I focused on telling my story. I focused on letting them know about my upbringing in Lagos, Nigeria, letting them know what my motivations were, for wanting to be a doctor, but also like taking this route on public health, and I think that's one of the things that we should, the medical school process, the application process is the process where you can become very, very deeply contemplative on why you want to do something. And I think if you focus on that, as opposed to how do I necessarily like stand out versus like my competition, you will actually realize that, you have a unique story to tell. And that's actually what's going to, in the end, differentiate you. I don't want to say that like, at the end of the day, it's a numbers game. So you will end up needing to differentiate yourself, but I don't think that should be your focus. Your focus should be telling your story. You want to kind of define your why. Like, why do you want to do this? So one of the things that I advise people is to, explore broadly, like pursue everything that kind of interests you, even vaguely, but think about why you want to do it. So when I got my clinical research role, which was a full-time job, I had a few options. And I had options between going to a pretty like widely respected, prestigious medical institution to do my clinical research, or picking what I did. Again, I worked with somebody who is one of the foremost experts in his field, but Lenox Hill Hospital is not what the other institution was. And like I asked people for advice, and overwhelmingly people told me I should go with the other situation. But what I was looking to get out of my experience was not simply to check a box that, okay, I've done clinical research, and I did it here. For me, I actually wanted to find somebody who could be a mentor to me, somebody who I would enjoy working with, somebody who, who also wanted to work with me with, with the experiences that I had. And doing that, thinking about the why I wanted to really pursue this experience was so helpful, because in the end, I realized that the experience that I went with was the best situation for me. And then don't wait to document your experiences. So, I know there's a lot of people in high school right now. I think when you're thinking about college, when you're thinking about medical school in the US, most of the time they are looking for college experiences. If you do something that's like really deeply interesting and cool, speak to your advisor. In high school, speak to your advisor. There might be a place to put that on the application, but for the most part, they're looking for college level and beyond experiences. So maybe some advice to like take in right now, to use when you get to college is not to wait to document those experiences, because if you explore a lot of things, if you do a lot of stuff, you will realize that by the time you're applying to medical school, you have so many different experiences, but sometimes you might not remember them. You might not remember like what you did. You might not remember your contacts. So I don't know if anybody has ever seen like the AMCAS application. There's a lot of things that they ask when they're asking you to define, the experiences that you have. They'll ask you for a contact name, for somebody, at the experience, their email, the amount of hours you worked, and then they also ask for a description of what you did. So one of the best things that you could do pretty early on is just to make sure that you have like a journal, or like I don't know, maybe like a Google Doc, where like when you have an experience, you think about what you got out of it. You remember to make sure that you stay in contact with the people that you worked with, because depending on how interesting what you did is, a medical school might decide that, what they want to just like, ask your contact person, about what you did. I don't know how often it happens. Nobody is going to tell you like what it is, because nobody knows. But they ask for that information. So like you also need to be ready to provide this. In college, I actually took a class in the summer. It was a pass or fail class. It was called, I think, Intro to Health Professions Portfolio or something like that. And basically what they had me do was build out my medical school application before I applied. So I had all of this experience, like remembering like my experiences, writing a personal statement, filling in my grades, which I took that class in 2016 or 17. I didn't apply till 2022, but I had all of that information with me. So I could, so like when it came time to apply, like there were some experiences that I still used, and I was able to directly just pull from there. I was able to pull, contact details from there. So it's just something to think about, to not wait to document your experiences. Okay, so I think what you guys should find as key takeaways is, so be yourself as you build your network. I think the most important thing is to really be deeply contemplative about what you want to come across as your story, as opposed to thinking about like, how do I differentiate myself from everybody else? There's no two people have the exact same story, and that's as a result of, your upbringing, your lived experiences, life, just in general. And I think what helps me, and I think what helps a lot of people who are like very successful in the medical school application, is the fact that they kind of like block out the noise, and they don't necessarily waste too much time thinking about how they compare to other people, but they think about how they can really and truly express themselves and let people know, why they want to be a doctor. And then the build your network parts, kind of as I alluded to earlier, none of this stuff that I did, nothing that I've accomplished like happened in a vacuum. Almost every single thing that I've been able to accomplish across, about the 9-10 years that I've been in the US has been because people like, really held me up. Because I had friends, who studied with me, friends who explained stuff to me when, like I didn't understand, supervisors who looked out for me, the people who wrote my letters of recommendation, who said really nice things about me. These, you want to focus on making sure that as you explore your opportunities. And I think as you explore, research opportunities, leadership opportunities, it's natural that you build a network. But you could also be very, very kind of like intentional about how you go about it. And I'll tell you guys a quick story about like what I did applying this cycle. So when I applied this cycle, I don't remember who gave me this advice. It might have been one of my advisors. And they were like, just reach out to the deans of diversity at the medical schools that you're interested in. And I was like, okay. And I decided to do it. And I had varying levels of success with that. I had success at some schools where, like maybe they didn't have a dean of diversity, and I connected with somebody else, and they connected me with this other person, and they connected me with students. And some places where like, you know what, we don't want to talk to students before the application, during the application cycle or before the application cycle. So you're going to get differing levels of support. At UPenn, one of the people who I know really, really, really advocated for me throughout the process was somebody that I met in February of 2022. In kind of like the diversity and equity space at the medical school. So like, these are some of the ways you can be intentional about, I'm really interested in the school. I would like to build my network of like people that I know, I would just like to introduce myself, I would just like to put myself out there. I think those are some of the things that you could do to really set yourself up for success when it comes to the medical school application cycle. Okay, and with that, I would like to thank you guys for listening to me ramble on. I very, very much hope that there was something that was useful to somebody. I definitely want to plug F1 Doctors. I know that there's a lot of international students on this call right now. F1 Doctors, I do not believe I would be in this situation without, some of the incredible student doctors who helped me just not necessarily figure out my own narrative, but just bring it to life. F1 Doctors is a completely student-run organization made up of international students, just like, myself, just like yourselves, who want to help other international students get into medical school. So they were completely amazing. If you just search up F1 Doctors, it'll pop up. You can follow them on Instagram as well. And then the Student National Medical Association. So I don't know how familiar everybody is with SNMA, but SNMA is like the national organization for minority medical students. Now, in college, when you guys get to college, for you guys who are in high school right now, definitely look out for MAPS. MAPS is the Minority Association of Pre-Medical Students. If your college has a chapter, definitely join the chapter. Your college might also like have a different name for the chapters because at the University of South Florida, when I was there, our chapter was actually called the Minority Pre-Professional Science Society. Excuse me. Just because we wanted to open up membership to people who just, a lot of people want to do so many different things in like the allied health professions. Some people want to be doctors, some people want to be dentists, some people want to be physical therapists. So we wanted to kind of like broaden, the scope of our organization. But I talk about SNMA. So SNMA, you will find at the medical school. MAPS, you will find at the undergraduate level. And if your school has a medical school, there's a lot of times where they will work together. They'll have events, they'll have mentoring sessions. Being in MAPS, I was in MAPS from the first day of college to my last day of college. And, at the time of me leaving college, I was the president of my chapter. And first of all, it's, super, fulfilling, just to be around people who are like-minded, who want to get to this thing. That becomes, your support system, your network. I think it's a great leadership experience to have, especially because all medical schools know what MAPS is. So when they see that you're involved in that, that's always a green flag. And I also said to look out for AMEC in 2024. So AMEC is, and I've never been, I actually just found out about this earlier this year. It's a conference of medical students, pre-meds, and residents. So you see kind of like everybody in this like pipeline of medicine, people who want to get into medical school, people who are in medical school who now want to be, doctors. And essentially it's just like this big networking event. So you get to see, again, minority doctors, minority pre-med students, minority medical students, all in one place, trying to help each other. So definitely, if you can make AMEC in 2024, it's going to be in April, I believe. Definitely try. If you can't, that's fine. They have AMECs every year. It's an annual event. But just in general, one of the best things you could do is just, stay in kind of try to stay in the loop in what's happening in SNMA and especially at MAPS. But yeah, so thank you guys so much. And I hope we have some time for questions. But yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Ogo. That was a really enlightening conversation and presentation. It was really inspiring for having you join us today. A little tradition that we do for our amazing guest speakers is we do a round of applause on Zoom. So if everyone can give Mr. Ogo a round of applause, that would be amazing. And then we'll move into the segment of questions.
Thank you guys. I really appreciate it.
Feel free to raise your hand if you have a question for Mr. Ogo, and also utilize the chat, and then we'll be calling on people. Great. Okay. Basmala, feel free to ask your question.
I'm here. First, thank you so much for your great story and your great talking. And I have a little question.
Yes.
How did you split your hospital and medical school time from your daily life? And was it all about stress and studying all the time, like they talked about studying at medical school, or was there some entertainment in your life?
Okay, let me start from the bottom. So yes, I've always been somebody who, tries to find a good balance between whatever like school work I'm doing, because it's important. One of the biggest issues that physicians are dealing with right now is burnout. So it's super important to be intentional about, taking time to rest, to relax. Medicine, it's a great privilege what we get to do, but we're human beings at the end of the day. And we need to take care of ourselves if we are going to be able to like effectively take care of patients. So yes, I have a lot of fun playing soccer, watching soccer, playing video games, watching anime, doing so many things. I try to be very intentional about rest. Okay, now let me again maybe clarify. So I'm just about to start medical school. So I haven't spent a lot of time in the hospital as a medical student. I spent 2 years in a hospital doing clinical research though. In college, when I was taking classes, there were times I was shadowing. I think it all has to do with like finding a balance. Some people are more like readily able to just like find that balance and like see what works for them and like stick to that. Some people, it takes some time, and I think a lot of times medical schools, try to have a support structure and support system to let people, ease into medical school and then figure out like what's the best way to manage a lot of these things. Medical school is stressful, there's a lot of things that they're throwing at you. So that's why it's also important, to make sure that you find time to rest, to be intentional, all of those kind of things. I think the other thing I would add is that for most medical schools in the US right now, they kind of do split like what they call like, so it's kind of split into two phases. There's a preclinical phase and then there's a clinical phase. So like at UPenn, the first year and a half is going to be essentially just learning the body system, learning the important parts of like biochemistry that are relevant, like, again, just learning kind of like the hard sciences. And then you move into the clinical phase, which is where you're more in the hospital. Like the majority of what you're doing is in the hospital. You might have a class from time to time, but in a lot of ways, they try to section those two things so that like you could focus on one thing and then focus on the other. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. Emery?
Hi, okay. Thank you so much for acknowledging me. And I'd like to thank the speaker for being so down to earth. Thank you for all of your tips. But I was really interested on the part where you mentioned shadowing, like you followed a lot of medical professionals around. So I was wondering if I could do the same here in my country, though this concept is fairly new to me since I don't hear about it a lot. How did you personally, what do you think is the best way to ask a medical professional to shadow? Is it via email, or do you just ask them face to face? Or yeah, just basically those.
Right. I don't think there's no surefire way. I think I think one of the things that all pre-meds learn is, kind of this skill and just being persistent. Because the reality is most of the time you reach out to doctors, they're pretty busy. Sometimes you might reach out to 50 people and one person might respond, so it's kind of this lesson in just like persistence, also trying to problem solve. I would suggest, so something that I know a lot of people do is they reach out actually to like their primary care doctor. This is somebody you already have a relationship with, so it's in some ways it could be easier already because like it's somebody that you have this or like already established relationship with. You let them know you want to be a doctor, you would like to shadow them. Sometimes that works. Other times you might maybe just want to Google around to see if there's any like specific shadowing programs. Sometimes I think emails probably work better than cold calling people. Also because like sometimes it's even just difficult to get a hold of, the doctor's actual cell or, their main line. I would try a combination of, kind of all of the above. If you can call somebody, like call them. If not, email.
All right, thank you so much. So
Yep.
just a follow-up question about the following doctors around. I think there are like ethical implications to like, for example, patient privacy. So did they make you sign like a form for that?
The times I've shadowed. So there's typically a lot of like onboarding that you have to do. So like you said, there are ethical, considerations. And I guess one of the things that you kind of always you need to keep in mind is, one of the most important things that we have to do as healthcare providers is to respect patient autonomy. I think you will find that a lot of people are receptive to having people who are shadowing or like medical students, in when you're having a patient encounter, but sometimes like, they won't. And it's okay. It's not an indictment on you. It doesn't mean that, you're not a smart person or like they don't like you. Sometimes like, people are having a bad day. They just don't want to deal with anything else besides, their physician. I don't, to be honest, I don't really remember what I signed. I just know that I had to sign it to do it. But a lot of times, like sometimes they might, I don't know if they do background checks. Some places might do a background check. Some places will make sure that you actually get like a TB skin test, because, they don't want you passing on latent or like active TB to patients just because you're shadowing. I would say don't worry too much about like those kind of like logistic and administrative things that you need to do. If it's a place that like has everything set up, those like that onboarding process will go smoothly enough. But it's good that you're thinking about some of these like ethical things that you have to consider when interacting with patients in general.
Okay, thank you so much. That is
No
all.
problem. No problem.
Thank you. We'll go to a question in the chat. Yusuf asks, can you tell us how to write the best essay that expresses us in the best way?
I wish I could. The personal statement was actually the most difficult part of the application process for me. And I considered myself a good writer before, but I spent 5 months actually working on my like 5,300 word or character essay. I think what you need to do is like show yourself patience through the process. You want to have people who you kind of respect, and also people who probably have like the credentials to like tell you, okay, you can do this better, or this reads in a certain way. Don't add too many people into kind of like the pots. That was something that I did that probably was wrong. I had maybe between like 10 to 15 people giving me, advice. And I, but I guess one of the things that I found was that like, because I was very strong-willed about what I wanted to specifically convey, there were times when people gave me advice and I knew it wasn't the direction that I wanted to go in. If there was one piece of advice I could give when it comes to personal statements, is you need to realize that like, or you need to be very conscious that what you put out is what the admissions committee or whoever reads is going to take as their impression of you. So if you're comfortable with something, if you're comfortable with something being asked in an interview, if you're comfortable with them considering some part of your identity or your story as part of that personal statement, put it down. And if you think it is core to, the kind of physician you want to be, or, if it's core to the story that you want to tell, keep it in. Sometimes these things might be, what people consider a little uncomfortable or like hush hush to talk about. I think we're becoming a lot more aware and sensitive of mental health issues, but you'll get very, very contrasting views about like what to disclose when you're talking about, I went through this issue and that helps me think about this or think about that. So I don't think there isn't any surefire way to say that this is going to be to write the personal statements, but I think give yourself time. Like, always give yourself enough time to think that my personal statement might have to go through multiple drafts. Make sure that you're answering the question, why do you want to be a doctor? That's very, 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 very important. Like, some people don't realize that they're actually not, in your personal statement, not really passing along the message of this is why I want to be a doctor. And just honestly be very true to yourself. If somebody tells you to put something in your personal statement that you feel like doesn't reflect you, don't put it in. Because if you do, that is going to be the character assessment, or that's going to be part of the evaluation that your school has for you.
Perfect. Thank you.
I saw a question in the chat that just said something about what's an MPH. So I'll just answer that very quickly. An MPH is a Master of Public Health. So it's a master's degree for people who are interested in public health. And essentially public health is just kind of thinking about, how do we care for, population level issues? There's some things that are, basically like individual issues, like every doctor's appointment you go to, like that might be an individual issue that's resulted from a population-wide issue. Like, one of the biggest population-wide issues in my country, Nigeria, is malaria. So you could be a doctor and you could treat, I don't know, maybe if you're efficient, you could treat 100 people with malaria every month, but you could be a public health professional who works on like larger infrastructure level issues, like getting mosquito nets to people, making sure that there's no like just like open stagnant water so that like mosquitoes can't breed. And like those are the different levels of like these like health interventions we could do. Public health should be intertwined with medicine. It's often not in the US. And that's why even though the US spends like the most per capita on healthcare, the US doesn't have the best healthcare outcomes. When you think about like, similarly, like for lack of a better term, rich countries, the US always performs like almost like dead last when you compare them to the UK, Italy, France, because these are places that, think more about public health and like intertwine it with medicine.
Great, thank you. I think We have Mina who has their hand raised that has a question. Again, let us know how many more questions you want to take and how long you're able to answer them. We would want to
Yeah, no, I think I can go till 10 a.m.
Okay.
So 13 more minutes, yeah, for sure.
Okay, Mina.
Okay, Mina. Okay, I have one question, please, and thanks for your efforts for this session. When I prepare for my application or my resume, especially for living abroad and starting my medical career in universities abroad, can you tell me in points what should I prepare or what should I focus on to make my application better? Thanks.
Right. If can I get a sense of like where you're thinking about going for medical school?
Okay, now I think to in Europe, for example, or UN.
So depending on where you're going, the requirements might be a little different. So in the US, if you want to go to medical school, it's typically you have to go to college first. So like medical school is a postgraduate degree. So you have to go to college first. And most of these schools, honestly, like it might seem like a cop out, but most of these schools actually have the exact like requirements that they want listed on their websites. So I don't want to tell you what that would look like in Europe because I'm not exactly sure like what they ask for there. But you know, I think universally, if you want to go to medical school, they are going to want to see that, you know, you're doing well, you know, academically. They will like to see that, you know, you've done you have some type of experience that shows that you know what you're about to get yourself into. So that's why shadowing a doctor or working, you know, in the hospital, and whether it's typically in like a patient facing role, is helpful. That shows that you know what you want to do, but it also shows that you have shown kind of like the initiative to get that experience.
Hey, what kind of experience can I have in high school?
That's where it gets probably a little more tricky. So again, this is why I would probably say, like, make sure that you're looking at what those schools are asking for. Sometimes they will actually be so explicit and they will say, this is exactly what we want. Because again, medical school is a postgraduate degree in the US. They mostly like aren't looking to even see what you've done in high school. They want to see what you did in university before you start medical school. You know, I think also because like there's like a limited amount of stuff that you could do in high school. So like I said, I went to high school in Nigeria. I know that if I wanted to go to medical school, say like in the UK, I had friends who went to medical school in Turkey. You just had to have good grades. That was kind of it, as far as I know. So it just depends on where you're going, and you want to like make sure that like you look at the requirements for those places. In the US, it's slightly different because they want you to come like by virtue of the fact that you come out with a bachelor's degree first. They probably expect a little more like commitment and like, you know, a show of like diverse experiences. That may be like places in Europe where you can go directly from high school to medical school.
Thanks for you.
No problem.
The next question I'll take from the chat is from Aya, and she asks, I'm a volunteer at non-medical places, and I've obtained 2 volunteer certificates. Do you advise me to be a medical volunteer as well?
If you can, yes, because again, it's just another way to explore, you know, what medicine is like. So if you have the opportunity to have a medical role that's paid, that's even better. I know that might be difficult, but medical volunteering is a very, very good way to figure out like how does like what do you do in a hospital? You know, like what's the day-to-day, you know, job of, you know, physician? What's the day-to-day job of, radiology tech, a nurse, like you get to see those kind of things also in a schedule that typically will work for you. Like since it's not a job, you could be volunteering every week for 4 hours. You could be volunteering every other week for 4 hours. You could, it's something that could really work within your schedule. Essentially, I think you just want to make sure that by the time you're applying to medical school, especially if you're applying to a US medical school, you have some level of, patient care experiences. Because if you don't have any, they're going to look at your application and you could have, the most incredible application with the best scores, but they're like, this person has never been in a hospital. So how do they know they want to be a doctor? So whether that's a volunteer medical experience, whether it's a paid medical experience, whether you're shadowing, you just want to make sure that you have those experiences, even for yourself, because you get to see, do I want to do this? I have a lot of friends who, after they shadowed, after they, worked in a hospital, they realized that, this was not the job for them. So you owe it to yourself, I think, to explore these kind of things.
Thank you. I'll also combine a couple of questions I've been seeing in the chat. People are asking, how do you get started with research? How did you get started with research? And what are some steps you took to get to, your research position that you landed?
Right. So by the time I got my research job, at this time, I already had 2 degrees. And I think there were a lot of people, who had my same role, a master's of public health, who were going into research. So I think there was kind of this, like, I don't want to say a straight line, but there was a pathway for you to go where, like, if job openings were on, they would say, we'll take somebody with a bachelor's level degree, but, with an MPH, it's preferred. Now, by no means do you need to have a master's degree to get clinical research. I think one of the things that I probably wasn't very well informed of when I was in college was just like how easy it could be, to just get research. It's the same thing as like shadowing. Like there's no exact way to go about it, but if you're in a university, if you have an idea of a professor who's doing it, so this is where like it requires a little legwork on your end. In some places, if you join like an organization, like a student-run research organization, they might have resources on, oh, these are professors that are doing research. You could email them. A lot of it, really comes down to just like knowing what you want to do first, so that you can seek out those positions. If you've graduated from college and you're looking to get into research, then it's essentially just like looking for a job. Again, just take advantage of networking. One of the things that I did that I think really helped ease my job search when I was looking was I was connecting with people on LinkedIn who already had those positions. I was also trying to connect with people who had gone to Columbia to my program, because, just by the fact that, we went to the same university, like they were more open to just like speaking to me. So I think there's a lot of different ways to do it. You could search at your university, like who's doing research. If you're looking for it as a job, you could, just like look on job forums, but definitely like reach out to people. Because a lot of times there's a lot of like uniquely qualified candidates, and it sometimes like boils down to just like who do you know, or who has heard of you, or how have you put yourself out there, so that like, if they're looking at 3-4 resumes and everybody is great, but like you reached out to this person on LinkedIn, or you reached out to somebody on the team, like that might be the breaking points.
Great, thank you. That was really insightful information for everyone. Well, the next question we can take from someone. Abdul Rahman, I think he has his hand up. Feel free to unmute and ask a question.
Okay, I just wondering what should I do in high school?
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Abdul. I don't think I can hear you. Could you maybe type your question in the chats? And we'll try to make sure that we get your question since you already started speaking.
Yes, please type a question in the chat. I'll move on to the next person for now. AMR.
Hello, is my voice clear?
Yes.
First, I really appreciate you and your accent. It is very easy to understand. My question is, what can I do to improve my leadership skills, and how can I present it in the essays?
Right. One of the things that I found was helpful when thinking about leadership is, and these are things that you could actually just like search up and find. But there's different like kind of assessments on like leadership skills, leadership qualities. You could look at it to honestly, first of all, find out like what is your leadership style. I think for me, I found that my leadership style was servant leadership, like doing like being a leader through like actually like doing stuff, and like doing stuff first so that like people could see, how it's done. And I think if you identify your leadership style or leadership styles, then you can work at, improving them. Or then you could, challenge yourself to try to be a leader in a different, in a different field or in a different style. When it comes to how you could, kind of like express that on an application, I think you want to be contemplative about what did you achieve, first of all. I think the advice I got when I was making my application was, as a leader, they want to see that, like what was something tangible that you achieved. It doesn't have to be that, like you raised $200,000 for your organization. It could simply be that like, you were able to preside over like a transformative period in, like in your organization's like life cycle. Like when I was the president of the Minority Association of Pre-Medical Students at my campus, my organization, like our attendance had kind of like waxed and waned. And like I spoke about like how for me it was more important to, kind of have like this like what's the word I'm looking for? Like this kind of like resets when it came to the actual leadership team, like actually focusing on getting the people who are leading the organization with me, like on one kind of on a similar plane so that we could, deliver on what we wanted to deliver. And I spoke about that as like being the most difficult thing. But I also spoke about like seeing some of the results, like seeing the fact that like, everybody was more kind of motivated, everybody was more invested and committed in the organization. And that led to, our enrollment increasing. I think you could use one of, at the end of the day, like if you want to show results, it's always easier to show results like numerically. So, I talked about the fact that, our membership increased by 30%. That's a way that's, besides just like all of the flattery and like flowery language that you could use to describe, your successes and, like what you achieved, you also put like a numeric figure so that they know this is something that you achieved and this is tangible.
Thanks a lot.
I think Abdul Rahman sent his question in the chat, and he's asked, what should I do in or after high school to be able to attend medical school? So what are your tips to like, general tips pretty much for that?
Yes. Again, so it really depends on where you're going to medical school. If you want to go to medical school in the US or in Canada, you're not necessarily thinking, I don't think you should be thinking too much about like what you could do, because you're going to have a whole 3 to 5 years of university first before medical school, where you could think about where you get to explore and where you get to like find like what interests you. You might even find out that that might not be medicine, but you might find out that it is medicine, and then you have all of these different things to explore that first of all, confirm it to you, but then also like show your commitment to medicine. I think and I don't want to speak about that too much because I just don't know, but I think for most maybe European, and again, I think this was how it was in Nigeria as well, because Nigeria follows kind of like the British, system of education. Once you come out of high school, you take a national exam, and if you score high enough, you can get into medical school. So it might simply be just as simple as you kind of score as high as, whatever that cutoff is. I think it's similar in the UK as well. I think maybe you might have to do the GCSE, or you might have to do A levels, and depending on how well you do, you can get into medical school. So again, it just depends on where you're going, and just like making sure that you look at the requirements for where you're going, and you tailor, what you're doing to that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
We'll end up with, as our last question, we'll link your Instagram, if that's okay, for if people have other questions to send you,
Yes.
as well as your email, if that's okay.
Right.
Yeah, thank you so much for speaking to us. And I know there's a lot more people who have a lot more questions. We'll direct them to you after the call today.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. I really wish you all the best of luck. Remember, just focus on exploring. I think a lot of you are in a situation right now where like the top of mind thing should be just like exploring, like, is medicine what's right for me? And when you do, and if you do it enough, I think you'll be able to tell a unique story of why you want to be a doctor. So good luck.
Thank you. All right. We will segue now into our medical debate, and get started with that. Let's make sure. All right. First, we'll do a poll. The poll has been sent out, so we'll take a couple of seconds to get that finished. And if you can't see the poll, as always, please message Davina on Slack. That will be the best way to confirm attendance, preferably right now, just to get. And then, yes, I see some questions about Ogo's Instagram. We'll send it out today after the call, as well as his email. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to them. Yes, we'll segue into the medical debate now. All right.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and make the breakout rooms. So the way that the breakout rooms are going to work is I'm going to make 3 of them. So there's going to be about 87 of you or so in each breakout room, and you'll either be with myself, Ahmad, or Rourke. And we're just essentially going to be there to help you time the session. So we'll set a 15-minute timer, and then you can go ahead and get started on discussing the first topic. I'll go ahead and send the debate topics in the chat as well, again, in case anyone has missed the link, or if you perhaps haven't had a chance to read it over yet. So I'll go ahead and send it in the chat now. The way that the debate will work again is we will have one of us in the rooms there with you, and it's your job to kind of talk to each other. We're hoping that we'll just be flies on the wall, so we'll just be there to, make a note of who's going above and beyond and help you keep time so that you don't go over and that you have enough time to discuss all of the topics. So that's kind of going to be our job. And then we'll wrap up around 11 or 11:15 or so. It's probably not 11 where you are. So in about an hour and 15 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the breakout rooms in a second. Does anybody have any questions before I make the breakout rooms?
And just as a reminder for everyone, we are taking notes on who is going above and beyond, and we're going to be awarding certifications for that. So feel free to unmute your mic and converse about these topics. And we're again noting those down as well for whoever really participates and goes above and beyond. Yes, please feel free to have your mic open whenever you are whenever you're conversing about your stance that you took on that particular topic.
I see some people with their hands raised. Mena, did you have a question?
Yes, I'm sorry, but I didn't have the time to research about any topic in this debate. What I will do?
Please try to do some research now so you can participate. We ask that everybody participates in the chat or by unmuting at least twice. So there are 4 topics, so this should hopefully be attainable. But yeah, we are asking for your participation.
So yeah, I can research right now?
If you'd like to, yes, that would be great.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and open up the breakout rooms. And then Ahmad and Rourke, just make sure that you're both not in the same room.
We'll definitely do that. And again, you don't have to have the camera on if you're not comfortable, but we would love to see you.
Yeah, it would be encouraged to have your cameras on, but it isn't required. Okay, I'm opening up all the rooms. So please feel free to head out. And I'm also going to stop the live stream because this is the end of our